When it comes to a prominent and historic rivalry in the tech world, then it's obviously going to be between the two giants, Intel and AMD. If you're a tech enthusiast, then this is surely going to excite you the most. Some of you might be amazed to know that AMD and Intel have been tremendous industry pioneers, especially when it comes to CPU production. Let me make it clear. It has been around for almost more than 50 years. Since AMD carried out their most remarkable chunk of purchases CPUs, their Intel versus AMD banter has seethed on, and it continues even today. To understand the changes in summing up the majority, we should think about the factors that resulted in such changes and rivalry. But before we jump in to discover the historic rivalry of these two tech Goliaths, make sure you hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Intel and AMD are the historic and focal rivals in the world of central processing units. So, what's the reason for this rivalry being so significant? Well, to simply put it into words, while purchasing a PC, the decision of the CPU can hugely affect the general outlook of your machine. In any case, it tends to be pretty confusing to pick which of these organizations makes the best item for an individual preference of different specifications. The CPU could be considered as the cerebrum of the PC. It could likewise be determined with a symphony principle, due to the way that it matches and directs guidelines for the remainder of the framework. The CPU builds computations that can choose the value of different parts of the PC. So, now you know the CPU is an integral part. Things like RAM and hard plate stockpiling can be renovated as a rule. Yet, the kind of CPU, whether AMD or Intel, will be held for the certainty of the PC framework. This indicates that determining and selecting the CPU could end up being a crucial job. Almost all of you might be aware that several times, passionate PC enthusiasts and tech lovers get into intense discussions about which CPU is the most ideal decision. And these discussions can get more sizzling than a Netflix series. So, we should investigate what makes this competition so significant. In the mid-2000s, practically all cycles swayed towards single-handed jobs rather than multi-handed responsibilities. The outcome was a more terrible multi-threaded execution when different from a single-threaded execution. Even though both AMD and Intel CPUs were single-threaded at that point, it didn't prevent Intel from designing simultaneous multi-threading. Though, SMT couldn't change the static growth as it acquired new strategies against the competitors. After 2001, developers improved registering tasks for multi-threaded CPUs. In 2006, AMD and Intel delivered double-center CPUs with 4 threads, at last consummating the matchless quality of the single-threaded jobs. Even though center counts and strings were a match among Intel and AMD, AMD's Phenom X4 CPU's battle contrasted with Intel's Core 2 Extreme QX9650. The new quad-center CPUs had enough ability to deal with a low-power foundation process, at the same time with a powerful closed-view process without corruption in execution. Yet again, this accentuation on keeping the foundation on low power and lead applications on high power moved the attention towards single-threaded execution. It was at this point that AMD and Intel embraced opposite ways to deal with CPU production. Well, beyond 2006, Intel would be an unbeaten master in the CPU business. It's no surprise that both Intel and AMD have been around for a really long time. Still, Intel is marginally more established. We've noticed and got a more established organization back in 1968. However, it was only after 1974 that Intel made the 8080 processor. This set the fundamental stage for the x86 processors, and for almost 30 years, these processors were the groundwork of work area PCs. Furthermore, renaming the x86 brand Pentium helped Intel become a recognizable name to everybody and secure the market mastery they need today. For a really long time, Intel kept on pursuing strong choices, underscoring registering powers offset with long battery duration. This assisted them with being cutthroat and distinctive. AMD was established in 1969, basically a year after Intel, when Prime supporter Jerry Sanders was named AMD's most memorable president and CEO. AMD laid out its central command in Sunnyvale, California. Presently, making several qualifications among AMD and Intel as companies is significant. Most importantly, AMD is by a wide margin the more modest of the two organizations. Besides, AMD doesn't really construct their own chip. They plan the chips, but rethink the assembly. Meanwhile, Intel has north of 12 creation plants extended all over the planet in the USA, Ireland, Israel, and China. Only if you're new to the competition, you'll presumably realize that for some time AMD has been sort of an underdog, contrasted with the much established Intel. A research report revealed that because of hitting a high of 22% piece of the pie, AMD went down to float at around 17% of the market. This offer is in many cases attributed to some degree to their custom 8-center AMD Jaguar processors being utilized in Xbox One and PlayStation. In 2006, the competition developed when AMD obtained ATI, a graphics processing unit or GPU producer. This permitted AMD to convey GPUs that lived on a similar chip as their CPU. Although this was the sort of thing Intel could also do with its chips, it was a major step in the right direction for AMD. These graphic cards were known to bring about less graphical strength, yet they have lower heat results and power draw. This is a phenomenal serious power in the market for convenient gadgets. Nowadays, maybe AMD might be making a play for importance in the VR market. It shows that they have a competitive edge in the gaming area by fueling the Xbox One, Sony PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Wii U. Their appearance at Game Developers Conference put a weighty impact on their VR innovation, flaunting its double GPU Radeon Pro Duo realistic card that is created from the earliest stage for computer-generated virtual reality. At Intel, the methodology was to get the most recurrence on a single sensor and slink through single strong exhibitions. Despite the fact that AMD would be quick to cross the 5 GHz boundary with its most famous FX9590, it nearly resulted in disappointment. Intel's efforts to attain a similar accomplishment was more fruitful with its 8th generation Core i7 processor with a base recurrence of 5 GHz. Generally, the CPU effectively kept up with its 5 GHz presentation. Intel's vision vigorously impacted its items, expanding the base frequencies while keeping lower center counts than AMD. This system empowered Intel to have a high ability to center proportion while keeping up with the power necessities of their CPUs and keeping their CPUs practical. A center outcome was that for a great time, Intel was the processor of decisions for most gamers and elite users. AMD leaned towards multi-threaded duties considerably more than single-threaded jobs, even though AMD assisted its clock speeds, allowing it to make up for the losing times to Intel, but in single-threaded execution. Intel kept on accessing prevalent in multi-thread. Due to its vision, AMD centered its assets around the core count assortment, and the more centers the better. In 2011, AMD delivered an 8-center CPU in light of the tractor design, the disagreeable FX8150. The bulldozer engineering authorized AMD to recover ground in multi-thread programs. Nonetheless, AMD's exhibition at last staggered in single-thread responsibilities. AMD kept on pushing center counts and center frequencies. In any case, its engineering disappointed the market because of its wasteful carrier and significant expenses. AMD needed a modification that would take special care of its vision and re-establish the missing element. Exactly in 2017, AMD took the market by storm when they disclosed their Zen-based Ryzen processor, an incredibly high power processor that pushed crude multi-thread execution and passed the most impressive Intel processor while being energy proficient. Although AMD was behind in single thread, Zen-based processors had 2 times the multi-thread execution than Intel's 9th gen Core i9 processors. In 2019, AMD disclosed the Zen 2 design and achieved a great accomplishment that Intel thought about being unthinkable for quite a while. AMD at last came up with a CPU of a 7nm bundle rather than Intel's 14nm. That bite the dust shrinkage empowered AMD to exhibit the genuine force of the Zen engineering by shoving sensor builds up to 16 with its Ryzen 9 3950X. Harmony 2 not only achieved AMD's actual vision of multi-thread handling, and additionally empowered AMD to make progress in single-thread responsibilities. At last, in 2020, AMD revealed its Zen 3 design, zeroing in on elite execution acquired over its predecessors. With its Zen 3 plan, AMD ousted Intel from its lead in the commercial center. AMD also turned out to be the CPU of choice for most users, especially for its unrivaled multi-thread execution and high energy effectiveness, controlling a huge number of the control center PCs and OEMs. AMD chips are valued by some to be the steal deal and of bargain value. At an initial level, the cost of an AMD CPU can be lower than the cost of a fairly equally utilitarian Intel CPU. AMD may be said to offer more centers for a lower cost, yet Intel's hyperthreading could be one more serious variable on that front, improving usefulness without expanding the number of centers. Nonetheless, not all functioning frameworks support hyperthreading. Windows does, yet elective working frameworks may not, and this could subvert the additional benefit of hyperthreading. One more component of the analysis is reserved memory. Reserved memory builds the effectiveness of the processor. This is a memory that the processor will get to right away and over, and is a lot quicker than standard RAM, running at a revive rate that is nearer to the processor's genuine clock speed. This memory decreases squandered cycles. At the point when Intel's i7 2700K processor contains something similar to 8 MB of L3 level store memory as the AMD Vision-based FX8150 CPU, Intel has more reserved memory per sensor. The AMD has 8 sensors and Intel just has 4. So, with a similar complete store memory, it arises that the memory is more packed in the 4 centers, and this manner could work with more effectiveness since they don't need to communicate the mentioned information to and from the hard drive almost as frequently. Though if AMD chooses to revamp the CPU market, then Intel will have to pay more attention to innovation to outperform AMD's superior value. Well, not just this. In the end, it's always personal choice because many things are heated in such historic rivalries. No doubt, Intel brings some really great qualities to the table, but at the same time, AMD's chips perform most efficiently but at a certain low price while allowing you to play and enjoy all the games that you like. One thing is sure, we clearly owe the massive rise in power, efficiency and value to this rivalry between Intel and AMD. Well, we can just say cheers to 50 more years of this rivalry with some great innovations. Now, before we completely get to the end of this video, what do you think about this historic rivalry and what's your perception of it? Jot down in the comment section. Your feedback truly matters, so go on and share this video with all the tech people and continue watching because something absolutely exciting is coming up. Stay tuned.